Hey everybody, Matt, IronTrap Garage. We're doing another little podcast type thing, interview, whatever you want to call it. Shooting the breeze. We haven't come up with a name yet.
That might be the name. Shooting the breeze.
Shooting the breeze. So we're in an undisclosed secret location in Connecticut. I'm making this way more secretive than it is, but we are with the Giovannis, Ronnie, Roadster, and Laura. Thank you for letting us sit you down. I know this is not you guys are usually more hanging out and not doing camera stuff, but we twisted their arm to get them. So I've been hanging out with you guys a little bit here at some events since I've had my engine here and got to know you guys. And the biggest thing when I meet new people is you hear the stories. And that's why I had to have both of you, because as you both tell stories, it's always interesting to hear, different parts of it. So what I'm doing is we're going to see if we make it to 20 questions. It might be 10 questions because there's a thing. We always go on side tangents. But I just wrote a handful of questions, and we'll, go from there. So we have to start in the beginning. So both of you are motorheads. How did you both get into cars and get into this whole world? So Ron.
Well, it started, it was 1971. The last century. I'm driving my 1950 Ford half-ton panel truck to work in the neighborhood I grew up in. Laura and I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. And as I'm driving down a street in the neighborhood, I look to my left and I see this girl sitting on a porch every morning. Driving down this road, see this same girl sitting on this porch. And hanging around with a few other guys. This happened to be also in New Haven. And they mentioned behind the airport in New Haven, there's a dead-end road. It's called Orr Avenue. That's where all the cool kids went, and they were kind of like street racing.
Nice.
Now, as I mentioned, I had a 1950 Ford panel truck, Flathead Ford powered. Certainly wasn't a powerhouse, but it would chirp in first and second gear. So I think one night, I'm going to go down there. And I do, and there happens to be that girl I see every morning sitting on the porch with a young guy down there with a Dart. I like Mopars, like Hemis. So I start talking to the guy about the Dart and then start talking to the girl. And from that point on, the rest was history.
Wow.
A long history.
So, but what got you into old cars? I don't need that. Was there a person or a point of time that got you kind of interested in older cars or?
The person who actually got me into old cars is my oldest brother, Tony.
Oh. Okay.
Tony, he's 85. He has an unrestored 1931 Model A Ford Coupe, which he bought in the mid-50s, and he still has to this day.
Wow.
Well, Tony is the motorhead in the family. And every time I visit Tony, he'd have another different car he's working on, maybe a Plymouth convertible, various different cars like that. But he was also the mechanical guy. He was electrically talented. That's everybody in my family we all became electricians. But Tony was really the guy. He was the one in the family that got me hooked on the hydrocarbon habit. Like I say, he still has the Model A Coupe. That's the heritage of the family. That'll go to his son and his grandson. That will be in the family. My other brother Tom always babbled with cars. He had Packards. He had a '48 Ford Woody at one time, which I did have for a little while. I was thinking the '48 Ford Woody would be pretty cool to have.
Yeah.
You're in the '70s now, and the Beach Boys songs and all that neat stuff was going on. And then I began to learn about the Flatheads, because I mentioned I had my daily driver was the panel truck, but I wasn't driving at this period of my life. And I remember reading an article about Ford Flatheads, and they said if you had the Mercury crankshaft out of the Mercury engine, if you put that in your Flathead, well, you got more cubic inches. And I do remember in the barn where this Woody was sitting, I took the oil pan off and looked up. And I'm thinking, how in the hell did you change that thing out? And
A lot of
then,
bolts and things going on.
yeah, it was the beginning of uh, my becoming a motorhead.
Okay.
I remember being in high school, Carcraft magazine. I loved Hemis because I'm grew up in the muscle car era. I love Mopars. I love Hemis. Anything that I saw that had valve covers that had spark plugs in them, whatever that picture was, I'd always study it and read it. And then there's more to this history as life went on, but I do remember seeing a front engine rail, picture of it in Carcraft, and it had an injected Hemi in it. And when I read the text, it said Ardun overhead valve conversion on Ford Flathead block.
Ah.
This is just maybe 1969 or so. And obviously that stuck in my mind for a long time.
So that was kind of like the, not turning point, but that was the thing that kind of switch started to go like, ooh.
Yeah, and now I had that piano truck with a flathead. I've seen this back. I've seen the Ardun. I needed a daily driver, and it just happened to be that truck. And I actually bought that truck because I was thinking maybe I could use the engine in the Woody. And that didn't happen. The Woody went down the road, and the panel truck stuck around, and it ended up being our daily driver for a long time for Laura and I.
So what you told when we hung out this past weekend, you told me a funny story about you you had water in the engine. Obviously, New England gets cold.
Yeah, well, I'm still learning. Yeah, it's winter time, and once again, it's in New Haven. It's out on the street. Laura and I living in the third floor apartment in my mother's house, and it was cold. And I went out to start the truck up, and belts were squealing quite a bunch because it was frozen solid. So I didn't make it to work that day. I ended up getting the hoses off the radiator, took the radiator out of the truck, carried it up the 3 flights of stairs, and put it in the bathtub and let the water melt out of the radiator. And I went downstairs and started the engine up, and the engine got warm and the water melted. Frozen water melted. So, and that engine I still have. It's actually underneath one of the shelves right behind me.
Oh, that's cool. So that's
To
all
this
that's
day.
left of the panel truck. Is
I have the steering box, the pedals,
oh,
the hogshead, and the radiator.
that's cool. It still lives on.
Yeah, yeah.
Laura, what about you? So were you into cars from an early age or
Not an early age. Well, like he said, I was with my ex-boyfriend, and he had the Dart, and I really liked it.
Okay.
And I liked Mustangs.
Okay.
And then our first date,
Yes.
he picks me up. What was it?
Monte Carlo.
Monte Carlo. I said, "Where's the truck?
Where's the whole truck?
Where's the truck?" And I was shocked. And we went out on a date, and that's the beginning.
So it was kind of a mutual growing into the old car thing.
Yeah. I didn't understand it at first.
Just
The hot rod thing, and when we went to go look at the roadster, I have a cartoon. I still have it, and it shows a man and a woman and a man in a farmer field with the farmer, and they're looking at an old body on the ground, and above her head, you see a pile of junk. Above his head, you see a finished car.
that's so true.
Yeah, so and that was on our refrigerator, that cartoon, for many years.
Oh my God.
And I still have it.
That's crazy. So you both kind of grew into this
Yeah.
hobby
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, once the car was together and we were using it, then I got hooked.
But you were working in the industry as well, right?
Yeah, not well. I worked at Total Performance. They
Yes.
did T-buckets
Yep.
from 91 to 98,
Oh, that's cool.
and that was my favorite job.
yeah.
Really, the people were great. It was a family
Yeah, yeah.
organization, and they were great. And then I got out of it when the kids were born. I worked at a nursery school for a few
Okay.
years and did not like that, but it brought in some money.
But cars were always that whole time. Cars were still, even with the kids growing up, that
Yeah,
the family kind of revolved around
yeah,
cars and
Yeah.
everything.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
then I worked at Cobra Automotive.
Okay.
It's right down the street, and $1 million cars, race cars.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that
so
was fun.
you were still able to kind of find a way in the industry.
Yeah, yeah.
And Ron, your career, most people that don't know you probably think that you automotive your whole career. What was your career prior to retirement?
Well, besides being into cars, I love trains, and I eventually was able to get a job at the railroad. Yeah, back when I started out, the idea was if I could get a job I liked and the railroad was it, and just hired out and worked on the railroad in the signal department for 38 years.
Wow. Yes, I think a lot of people probably would how now they look at what you do. Oh, he must be had a shop, hot rod shop, but that's not the case. That was interesting to me. What was there a turning point that made you get so into specifically flatheads? Was there like your first engine you hopped up, or a guy you knew had? Like, is there something that made you? I mean, I know you had the panel truck, but like, there's casually having a truck you drive and this insanity.
I would say I blame Rod & Custom for that.
Oh, okay.
There was the AV8 Roadster that they were putting together with a flathead when I was in school and going to high school. In reading those articles of the 29 AV8, the flathead, the builds, the carburetors they used, that was a channeled body, and I remember reading how they built their sub rails for that channel body to put it on the deuce rails. So that AV8 project, how to paint lacquer, that's what really got me going to the point where I was building a backyard hot rod, and I started with a deuce roadster of all things. I lucked out finding a deuce roadster back so long ago, and I don't want anybody to hate, but in that era, I was looking at $1,000 roadster.
And that's the roadster.
The roadster, the one that Laura and I have had now 52 years. That was when I finally did get it. I traded a 51 four-door Merc for it, which cost me $65 because I wanted that Merc engine for that crankshaft that I mentioned earlier. I finally had the Merc engine with a crankshaft, but I was able to trade that Merc and $800 to actually get our Deuce Roadster.
Oh my God.
Which...
Was it rough? Was it pretty rough?
The body was up on top of the chassis with 2x4s because it had no sub rails.
Of course, yep.
So now we get back to Rod & Custom. That AV8, how did they build the sub rails? That's exactly how I built them in my car, in a rented one-car garage in New Haven. In every step along the way, the Halibran quick change, which I bought brand new.
Wow.
Don't get mad now, but that was $225. That was a brand new center section in the Halibran box, open drive.
Wow.
And I think I got 3 Cad LaSalle transmissions back then for probably $100. The front axle was a 37 Ford tube axle.
Cool.
Which came off of an old T-bucket project that was stillborn. So I was fortunate enough to find parts that were really kind of neat and to slowly put the car together that way there. In that first year, it came out in primer, rattle cam primer. The first ride ever was on a milk crate with a wire coming through the dozens of holes in the firewall that was connected to the 3 deuces that were on the Flathead.
So that car, that was what the one question I had always wondered. So that car wasn't, an Ardun wasn't, for that car from the get-go. You started out with a normal flathead. And
yeah, the car started as a flathead, stock, just a 40 over bore, 3 3/4 stroke. It did have fin heads. It had 3 carb intake and Edelbrock intake on top of it. To the Cad LaSalle transmission and the open drive Halibran. The one thing I like to use the options, so I did beat on it a lot.
Yeah.
The first failure was the toothpick axles twisting in the Halibran, so we began to learn limitations.
The noise.
And the gear noise, and it was a good time to learn and teach, and there wasn't anyone around to really ask. It was just learning it and going along in a backyard hot rodder from the era would be doing. I was doing it at the beginning of the 70s, but pretty much doing like others were doing in the 60s and 50s as well.
So when did the Ardun come into the picture? Was that was your first Ardun? When did that come into your?
The Ardun was always in my mind, obviously.
Yep.
And because I did do the Flathead the way I did it, I began to understand that there were lots of speed parts for Flatheads. I actually began collecting Flathead speed parts. Obviously, the Ardun was always in my mind.
Yep.
Never knowing that being in Connecticut, an Ardun would be anywhere near in the equation. But there was a few guys in Connecticut that were deep into Flatheads. One guy's name was Flathead George, actually. He built a lot of Flatheads for people. And he would always come by. I would talk with him or see him, and he said he knew of somebody who had Ardun heads. Ooh. And there was another guy, his name was Pete Coleman, that hung around with this fellow, Flathead George. And they said they knew somebody had an Ardun, and they would get the story, well, next weekend we're going to go. And then I would call at the end of the week, we're going to go. No, next week. That went on quite a few weeks, And then one day, this guy, Pete Coleman, came to my house. It was in the winter, actually. It was snowing lightly outside at the time. And he come by my house, and I said, what about this Ardun? He said, well, yeah, I do know where it is. I said, well, let's go now. So we did. And we drove up to, it was Maine. The Ardun heads weren't there.
Oh, what?
The Ardun heads weren't there.
Oh, no. All the way to
After
Maine.
all these years.
And snowing and
Yeah, and we had there was deep snow just to walk out to a barn where there was remnants of an Ardun. There was some spark plug tubes, a couple of valves, but there was no more Ardun heads. They had already been bought by another parts collector out of Pennsylvania. And
Dang PA guys.
yeah, PA. And it took me many more years to learn that the cool places to find the stuff are those guys in PA.
Yeah.
And Hershey, PA.
Yes.
But I'm not there yet. I've never gone to Hershey yet. So on the way back, the guy goes, oh, well, I do know where there's a set in Norwich, Connecticut. I go, oh, boy, okay. We just went all the way to Maine out of Connecticut. There's no heads. So eventually, I did go into this guy in Norwich, Connecticut, and I did see the Ardun heads.
Wow.
you and Mike.
Yep, and that set of heads is what's on our roadster to this day. And the day that those heads I got to see, it was a complete engine, actually. They were in the back room of a place called Freddy's TV Repair Service.
Of all places.
Yeah. It turned out that Freddie Doolittle sponsored race cars at Stafford Motor Speedway and Waterford Speed Bowl in Connecticut. And the Ardun heads, some way, somehow, he had found them in the 60s. He had put them on a flathead block, and they would not let him run that engine at the round-around track, so he took it out and ended up eventually putting it in his Ford panel truck. 1950.
Oh, my God.
So Freddie's mentioned he put it in the panel truck. He got to run the engine a little bit. It was a lot more than that panel truck should have had, so he quickly took it out and put it in a back room at the TV repair service. And then when I finally found it, went to go look at it, as Laura mentioned, a good friend of mine, Mike Hart, who at the time had an Ardun,
Oh, okay.
which I finally was able to at least learn about Ardun and understand them. He came with me to see them. I had him with me because he knew what to look for. And I'll never forget, Mike always had a small adjustable wrench in his pocket.
Okay.
And the Ardun heads, like looking at yours, we have the knurled rings on the tubes.
Yep.
And then there's those 3 nuts that also hold down the valve covers.
Yep.
So this Ardun engine sitting on a dolly at a back wall in a narrow room, dimly lit, and there's this Ardun sitting there, all original, stock, 1 2-barrel carburetor on it, and we needed a light to see it better. So the guy, Freddie Doolittle, went to go get a drop light, and in the interim there, I remember taking the passenger side valve cover off with the ring, took the rings off, and Mike took out his adjustable wrench, and I took the nuts off, and I pulled the valve cover off, And it was like, they were like NOS. And Mike kept saying, they're mint, they're mint, they're mint. And I said, Mike,
Shut up.
stop. He's going to come back in here.
Be cool, be cool.
Yeah. So what he did was looked it over, put the valve cover back on. Freddie, we used a flashlight, looked it over. Freddie had this big box full of spare parts. There were valves, springs, rockers, lifters. There was a whole bunch of things. He had 3 sets of head gaskets, Fitzgerald copper Ardun head gaskets. It's like, here's everything to do an engine plus spares.
Wow.
And Freddie wanted $5,000 for it. And I'm like, okay.
And what year was this?
This was
Early
1982, maybe 83.
That's a lot of I mean,
Oh,
that's,
Yeah.
it was. It was all
We
the
had a
money.
house. We had a son.
It was a bunch of money. And this happened to be on a Saturday. Spent quite a bit of time looking it over. And Mike and we drove back to the house. And when I got it home, there was a bunch of cars around the house. And I didn't understand what all the cars were doing there. And I walk in, and there's a bunch of friends. We're all in the living room. Laura's looking at me, and I'm thinking, I screwed up because I forgot. We're going to go out to dinner and the movies and stuff.
oh,
Yeah,
no.
like, hey, you know what I have my mind on that
Oh,
whole
yeah,
day, and
yeah.
it sure wasn't that. So now I'm thinking, I'm walking, I'm busted. What's going to happen? So Laura, just the question was, did you see it? Yes, I did. She goes, well, what are you going to do? I says, it's too much money. I told her it's $5,000. She goes, when would you have another chance?
That's
And that was on a Saturday night. Monday afternoon, I went to the local bank, and can I take out personal loan? Like Laura mentioned, we had a new mortgage and a young son,
Yeah.
but they said yes.
nice.
And I went back a week or so later. It was actually 2 weeks later. I drove my roadster there with the Flathead in it, and showed Freddie Doolittle, this is what I would like to put the Ardun in one day. And I made a counter offer, and I was able to buy it for a little less than $5,000. He agreed to that. I went back to the bank
That's amazing.
and asked for the loan, and it took 2 years to pay off the loan. The Ardun just sat and waited until I paid off the loan. And then around 1985, I finally was able to put the Ardun in the car. And when I took the Ardun apart and looked at it when I got it home, it was one of his race crankshafts. They were all polished. It had the high volume oil pump, which back then was incredibly hard to find. So it had some really nice stuff on it. And
Wow.
I eventually put the engine in the Roadster and then began to learn Ardun. That was about 1985 or so.
But Laura, you knew when you made that comment, he had probably been upset. I know how this stuff works for us nut jobs are in this stuff. Like he probably was obsessing, with that other one in Maine. It's like you're talking about it to your significant other. Oh, we're going to look at it. I can't wait. So you probably knew how important it was to him. And
Oh, yeah.
made that comment. Like that's, those chain of events pretty much. I mean, you making that comment kind of changed your life a little bit because if you didn't get that engine and you never got into Ardun's, things might be a little bit
Right.
different. So.
We would never know what the path would be. Would there be another chance as life went on? Probably. But for it to have happened there, to find an Ardun engine in Connecticut, never dreamed of such a thing as it was.
Yep.
And here seeing the picture of one as a kid in Carcraft magazine. So every star for Laura and I in our life has seemed to line up as time has progressed. There's been setbacks in cars that we couldn't get and things we couldn't, but to stay on a given path, and I like to stay focused, and pretty much we have.
But you guys, we talk about that a lot with the stuff that I've done over the years. Like you make it, when there's something like that, you acknowledge an opportunity, you make it happen because, similar to when I got my stuff, it was like, I only had so much money and I knew the things I wanted to have that I could never have a chance again. It's so it seems, I've heard that a lot with older friends over the years. It's like when you have that, you get maybe one or a couple of chances in your life's hunting for this stuff to get that. And you make it happen. It usually comes at like the not best time. It's
Of
like,
course.
Yeah.
We-
We had no money back then.
so
No money.
let's buy this engine for for a roadster that it just you had to make it happen.
Yeah.
So the roadster at this point is an iconic car in hot rodding. Whether you guys I'm sure realize that, but it's seen a lot of miles. How many miles do you guys think you've put onto the Roadster in all these years, roughly?
It's over 100,000.
It's crazy.
I think more.
Really?
Well, it's over, but exactly how much over? I've had 3 different speedometers in it through the years, just changing gauges and changing designs and the eras.
So how and how many miles do you think you think you have 100,000 even on the including the Ardun, or is that kind of
No, combined, be it the Flathead era and the Ardun era. Majority of the mileage is definitely Ardun related, though.
wow? And you've driven it cross country twice.
2 times.
Now, what was the? Well, you were telling me. I think the first time I was here, a funny story that when you got one time you were driving, did you hit snow or what was the?
That was the second.
Second
trip
time.
in Wyoming.
Really?
Yeah, we leave. We were in. Oh God, I forgot the name of the city. It was Utah,
Okay.
and we're dressed like this, you
Yep.
know, in our summer clothes, and we start going, and we get to Wyoming, and we're going up in elevation and up and up and up, and then I hear a little tinkle on the windshield. And so it started, and then it got really cold too. So
Oh.
we stopped under a bridge and we put our jacket on, put shoes on. Yeah.
Did you have a
and-
top on the car?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
We always, not baking going across country and back, we always had a top on the car.
yeah.
And because it was so cold, I had side curtains, so I put the side curtains in as well.
First time we ever used
Yeah, never, ever. I've always had them. They're pretty simple, made out of plastic, really. It's quick
Yep.
and easy to put them in.
Yeah.
But I definitely put them in that morning, and then the godforsaken snow. And I do remember driving in the tracks of an 18-wheeler in front of me
Yeah.
Wow.
because I had
It was scary.
bias ply tires on the car, fenderless bias ply tires
God.
with the top half of the hood, with the Ardun heads hanging out, with the temperature gauges on, bottomed out at as low as they could go. No heat in the engine
Oh
at
my God.
all.
So no heat in the car.
No.
Well,
no.
we do have heat in the car, but we didn't even think of turning the
Like-
thing. I mean, it would warm our knees.
Okay, but with the engine not even warmed up because it's so cold out, you're not getting.
No.
Nothing.
Oh my gosh.
So then
And-
we stopped at Fort Bridger, Wyoming, to get our bearings. What are
Right.
we gonna do?
Wow. But you just figured it out and did it.
Yeah, we started
The-
going
The
again.
biggest thing was stop there. It was lunchtime. My stomach was in knots.
Yeah, I believe it.
Mine too.
Yeah.
There was no place to park under an underpass. There was no covering. It couldn't go under the pumps. So we literally parked out in the snow. I pulled on alongside of a motorcycle. We have problems. Hey, look at the motorcycle. And he's heading east on 80 as well because I saw him inside the place. And we asked, is there a hotel nearby? And they said the next exit there was a little motel. So the goal was to get back on the Interstate 80, continue coming east.
It was still early in the day too.
It being lunchtime, and
Yeah.
it was what it was. We were just going to have to write it out. And as we did, the elevation started coming
dropping.
back down. No more
Turned
snow,
into rain.
and we continued heading east.
But you did 2 cross-country trips in the Roadster, and I mean, you obviously approved that these engines can, be used.
Yeah, it was first trip was 6,000 miles by the time we got home, and the second trip was 7,000 miles, and that was all highway driving, cross country, cross America and back. There was we didn't get off someplace and let's take Route 66.
The second trip we had a GPS too, so we did more.
Oh, okay, right.
First trip we had the AAA book that we flipped the pages.
Oh
I
my
was the
God.
co-pilot.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. That's funny. That's great. I mean, most people wouldn't in any old car, but to have a car with an engine that is, to most.
I will say, every nook and cranny in my car, I had spare pieces.
Okay.
Now, I didn't have a spare alternator or starter, but I had parts to rebuild the alternator, parts to rebuild the starter. I had water pump rebuild parts. I had rockers, push rods, lifters.
Wow.
I had as much as I possibly could have.
In our suitcase.
Just in case. Yeah, in the suitcase. We had room for a suitcase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever have any roadside repairs during those trips, or
The first year in 2006, we went out with our friend Scott Cave and his Deuce two-door highboy
Okay.
with a 671 blown Flathead and our supercharged Ardun. We started out, we left here from Connecticut, went to the Good Guys event in Indy, and then from Indy, we went north to pick up 80 and started driving out west. And both cars had the same the same item broke on both cars. The right rear tailpipe hanger on both cars broke. That was it.
The roads were rough.
Oh yeah.
And on the second journey, there was no problems coming
Wow.
or going, none whatsoever.
That's no. I mean, that speaks to your building the car and prepared. Being prepared and everything. And but you said you guys had kind of like every night at the hotel.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, every night I'd clean it up. Like we mentioned on the blower, it would vent gear lube out of the front of the blower. Have a little catch container every night. I'd take what went into the catch container, put it back in the blower, and check the lube. And every once in a while, I grease the rear bearings a little bit on the blower and clean her up. Put the car cover on it. And next morning, uncover it, and off we go again.
Man. So, the next step in this, is land speed racing. So you did the street car thing and all of that. What made you get so into land speed racing? Was there a friend, or was it just you went one time and like a lot of people I hear just,
It's something from at least the era I grew up in. When you got Hot Rod or Carcraft or all that, they'd always have Bonneville Speed Nationals. And you'd see the cars, like the Redhead, the Altigues cars, all those cool cars, and you'd see them as a kid.
Yep.
And then the 1980s came along, and I thought it'd be kind of neat. I wanted to go to Bonneville. It was the early 80s. I think it was 1982 or 83.
Okay.
So I got on an airplane in Connecticut, flew out to Salt Lake City, and drove out to the Salt Flats, and it was underwater.
Oh.
I didn't know it would do that. And the friend I went with at the time, we were so close to Vegas from Wendover, Utah. You could take the low road there, and you could get into Interstate 15, Nevada, Vegas area. It may be a 3.5 4 hour ride at the most. And he wanted to head that way there, and I wanted to be at Bonneville. I didn't want to go to Vegas. So I ended up going the other way. I went back to Salt Lake City, took the airplane, came back home. Because I was there. I never even heard an engine fire up. And then it was late 80s. I got the chance to go back again with my friend Mike Hart, and we went, and Bonneville Speed Week was on. Got to see all these iconic cars like the Redhead, Altique Streamliner. I saw McCain and Holtz, who had a rear engine, fuel-injected. Actually, they had a fuel-injected Flathead Ford Capri, one of the cars, and the other was a blown and injected rear engine Lakester, which was actually a dragster chassis. Wow. At that time, by the 80s then, I was playing with GMC blowers on my Flatheads.
Okay.
So I was intrigued, and I knew about McCain and Holtz. So I saw a lot of the icons. The Redhead was Ardun powered, that Streamliner, and in the back of the pickup truck was a spare one. So, but there was maybe 125 vehicles running, and it was just the neatest thing. We stayed at the iconic hotel in Bonneville there on the Nevada side, where the Wendover Will was in front. State Line Casino Hotel, that's where my friend Mike and I stayed.
Okay.
And back then, you walked up to the counter, and all the keys were in cubby holes behind the counter, and you tell them what room you were in, and they give you the key, and then in the morning, you gave them the key back, and they gave you a roll of nickels. And you could play the one-armed bandit. So Mike and I, we took that roll of nickels, and we played the one-armed bandits. We would win, and we got enough money for lunch and dinner. We got bologna sandwiches and bread at the local convenience store in town, and went out to the Salt Flats with our water, and went out to watch the runs and stuff. And that was an experience. We're at Mecca. I didn't know what my future would hold when it come to Bonneville, but I had finally experienced such a thing. And then life went on. for decades, a
Oh,
lot of years.
So it wasn't like you went, saw it, or like some people are like the next year, like I got to build a car.
Could-
I got to,
Not at that point in life. No,
okay.
there was 2 kids. They were still very young. Still had the mortgage. Got a job. I didn't have that many weeks of vacation, but we were hot rodding, so I had a way to enjoy myself.
Right.
But I always did like Bonneville, and then
And I told him next time he goes, he's taking me.
Oh, you were like,
Yeah.
why couldn't I go? Yeah.
'cause Laura, being the mother, she's always home with the kids.
Yeah.
So there are things that I was able to do, she was unable to do. And then eventually, a friend of ours down the street, Stephen Blarkham, ends up, he went to Bonneville for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And of all things, he got baited so bad, he bought the Thacker and Shine Street Roadster, which Jimmy Shine drove. They got Jimmy Shine one of these red hats. And it was a D-blown gas street roadster. And I didn't know Steve was doing all this. And all of a sudden, in town, here, Steve mentions, oh, by the way, I got this race car. And Steve started running it at Maxton, North Carolina at the East Coast Timing Association's land speed events. And so our son Ron started helping Steve with the race car, and we went down to help Steve as a family, and we began getting our
Your feet wet.
feet wet. You could say our feet wet going to Maxton, North Carolina, helping Steve with the race car, and then all of a sudden, I heard about a drop tank buried in the ground that ended up at the local junkyard, and there was a belly
down the
tank,
street.
and here he goes. Start building a land speed race car.
So you all got hooked kind of the same time.
Pretty much. Steve had gone to Bonneville a couple of times with the Roadster. We didn't go at the time when Steve went back to Bonneville with the Roadster, because he was trying to get the D-blown gas street Roadster record. And it wasn't simple to do. Steve was learning with the car. He was hurting parts, and I remember us being at Maxton, North Carolina, thinking, man, this would be cool. Let's get this car go 200 miles an hour in the mile. It took a lot of runs before that car finally got to 200. And of course, when it did, everybody was super happy. Steve was. He got his 200 mile an hour hat down at Maxton. And then from that point, the car kept repeating itself. And thankfully for us, we have Loring, Maine with Loring Air Base up in Maine. We go up there to run the cars as well. And that's helping getting used to getting a land speed car. Let's say a land speed car, start cutting your teeth on doing a land speed car. I initially, when we built our car, I didn't do it with the intent of going to Bonneville. I put our 671 supercharged Flathead in the car, which actually did at one time hold the record of Bonneville in the mid-70s. I bought the whole combination from a friend of mine that I learned. He helped me and nurtured me on how to do supercharged flatheads.
Oh, okay.
He lived at the time he was living in Memphis, Tennessee. His name's Paul Cosma. And Paul built a supercharged flathead and put it in his Model A Roadster and flat-towed it from Memphis out to Bonneville. In mid-70s, set the record at 135 miles an hour. And I now wanted to do a supercharged flathead. Local guys in my car club said, well, this guy Paul Cosma used to live in Connecticut. He's in Memphis, but he had us a supercharged flathead. So I reached out to him by phone call and talked to him. And I told him what I'd like to do. He wasn't running the supercharger anymore. And he said, I'll sell you the supercharger setup off that engine.
Ooh.
So I bought it, and I put it on that pretty much stock flathead that was in my Roadster from the very first day. And I proceeded to blow the head gaskets right in the driveway with that. But I started out with a 671 blower on my little old Ford Flathead.
Wow.
And just kept learning.
So what, fast forward now, you know, into setting records and everything you got, you and the team have done. What, how fast have you guys gone?
To get the red hat, my son and I, our rookie year at Bonneville was 2016.
Okay.
So for our rookie year, thinking about Bonneville, originally we built the race car as a Lakester. And the Lakester, supercharged Lakester record was held and is still held by Eric Hansen out of California. I mentioned Steve's Roadster, the Backer and Shine Roadster. We went with Steve to Bonneville, and his third time out with the Roadster, and as a family helping Steve, he did finally get the car over 200. He bumped the record. Steve got his red hat. The Eric Hansen Lakester was pitted down a few spots from where Steve had set up his pit at Bonneville. So I went to go look at the car, and I was in awe at Eric because he was literally rebuilding the engine in the pits and had his pistons out and the connecting rods, and I watched him put the piston rings on and that, and he was putting it back together. And the thing was, Eric's record was two teens, 200 in the teens.
Okay.
As a Lakester, the fastest we ever went was 182 up in Maine at the 1.5 miles. 200, over 200, that's a big step from 182. So I remember coming home one winter, it was the end of the season, running the Lakester, and I opened up the SCTA's book, rule book. It also lists records, and I looked through the records, and there was rear engine modified Flathead, supercharged Flathead class. The record was under 140 miles an hour.
Wow.
And I thought about it and talked with Ron about this and said, what if we convert the car to rear engine modified Roadster? So that winter, Ron and I here at the shop, we cut the chassis. The rear engine modified Roadster class had a minimum wheelbase. Lakester class does not.
Okay.
When they were running Roadsters, rear engine Roadsters way back, guys were going 106-inch wheelbase, like a regular Roadster. Just stick an engine behind you and put your butt up in the engine compartment. Well, those cars are pretty dangerous, and a lot of guys got hurt.
Yep.
So for a long time, that class was outlawed. It didn't exist. Sometime in the 2000s, the class was reinstituted. Now that it was a new class, the minimum wheelbase had to be 140 inches. So you had a rear engine modified Roadster class, and now you had to have a long Roadster. Our Lakester was 130 plus inch wheelbase.
Okay.
And I looked at it and said to Ron, if we cut the back of the chassis, let's add on and get the wheelbase to just over 141 inches. And over a winter's time, we extended the wheelbase, and I got a 27 Roadster body and laid it on there. And we progressed along over a winter and put it together and came out in the spring. That was 2014, actually the spring of 2014. And I put in the little 258 cubic inch engine that I used to put in my Roadster that had the 671 blower on. And I put a different style blower on that little tiny engine. In the first pass up at Loring, I did 171 at the 1.5 miles with this tiny little engine. In 2014, we understood that we had a good possibility of doing something at Bonneville in the class. Well, 2014, Bonneville was underwater. 2015, Bonneville was underwater.
Oh, jeez.
2016, Bonneville Speed Week was on. So we went to Bonneville in 2016 with the car. We now did not have a 258 cubic inch engine in there. Ron and I built two engines. During 2014 and 2015, I built a much different engine. Ron and I machined and built our own engines back then. I had a different crankshaft, more stroke. We're now at 292 cubic inches. And with a different blower, the car was in the 180s right out of the box. It was running 180 easily up at Loring at the 1.5 miles. And at the Ohio Mile, which was East Coast Timing Association, I remember going at the mile in Ohio, I did 178 from a standing start with the car. So we knew we had good power in the car and good speed.
Right.
And then 2016, we loaded up, put the race car on an open trailer, put a spare engine in the back of the truck and a bunch of spare parts. Our friend Steve was going out with his car, and he had a big old trailer, and we put an engine hoist in there and spare parts, and between his trailer and the back of our truck, we had a lot of things to help us out. Actually, the spare engine was in Steve's trailer,
Okay.
because we had two engines, and that was it. I had to do a rookie run at Bonneville, and in the rule book it tells you on your rookie pass at Bonneville, you cannot exceed 150 miles an hour. You're proving to them that you could handle the car. That means I have to go down, make 2 mile run, pull the parachute, control the car, leave the course, and then they sign off your license to go to the next speed step, which for me was a 175 step.
Okay.
And at that point, that very first run, I did 142 in 2 miles, holding the car back. At that point, we were over the existing record on the rookie pass.
Just holding back. Yeah.
So it took the car directly to impound, the very first pass ever. I went to impound with the rear engine modified roadster. The next morning, we went back to the rookie course, the 2 mile course, but now with no holdback. I could go as fast as I could go to the second mile. And I did that and went over 170. Went back to impound. I had them seal the engine. In order to get a record of Bonneville, they have to measure the engine, bore and stroke for cubic inches.
Okay.
In our class, the Flathead, there's a maximum cubic inches of 325. We built an engine that's 292 cubic inches. So they sealed the engine. That means they can't take the oil pan off and try to change the stroke. We could take the heads off and we could work on the valve train if we want to. We took the car back to the pits. I changed the gear in the quick change. We cooled the car down, and now I went to the short course. Short course now is 3 miles timed and 2 miles to slow down. Now, I've never gone farther than 2 miles now because I just did that the day before. Well, I did it actually earlier that day. Well, now I'm going to hold the car wide open for 3 miles. I've never done that before. At the third mile, I did 191 miles an hour. The other thing that we learned, not initially, was on that 3 mile run, we're still learning. You have timing points. There's a clock at the mile, there's one at the 2, the 2 1/4, and then you got the 3 mile clock. Although the mile clock at mile 2, if you want, you could use that for a record. The 2 1/4 tells you is your car accelerating from the mile 2 to the 2 1/4, and it also tells you from the 2 1/4 if the car's accelerating to the third mile. The 2 1/4 mile course timer on the short course also is a qualifying number to get you to the long course. If your car is over 175 or higher at the 2 1/4, your car now is qualified to run on the 5 mile course.
Oh.
On my third pass at Bonneville in the race car, my time slip said I was at 178 at the 2 1/4. And then progressively got up to the 190s at the third mile. We now took the car to impound again, prepared the car for the next morning's backup run. Now, this is Monday morning. And on Monday morning, I did the backup run. Combined, I did 192 in the good air the next morning. We ended up with the record. I ended up with a record at 192. We also ended up with a car qualified long course. We then took the car to the pits and changed the engines and put a fresh engine in the car. And then at that point, I put Ron in the car. Ron now got to drive. Ron never drove Bonneville. Ron was in the car. We took him to the rookie course. Ron did his 2 mile qualifier. And then we classed the car for the fuel record, which was at 158.
Okay.
That was set by a car from New Zealand. That was set back in 2009. The record, I think, was 158 in 2009. The guys ran a GMC blown flathead, rear engine modified roadster. I remember the car because it was a gorgeous car, burning alcohol. We saw that there in 2009 in person. So we put Ron in the car, and on the qualifier, now Ron is driving the car on the long course because we now have a long course qualified car with a Ford Flathead in it. And back in 16, there wasn't any other Flathead Ford cars running in long course.
Wow.
So we continued to stay to only mile 3. Ron qualified above the record on his rookie run. At the third mile, he was above the record. We went back to impound, prepared the car for the next morning. Unfortunately, the backup engine, which was a new engine, wasn't running as good as the other one. And on the next morning, Ron did the backup run, and we did lose the engine on the backup run. It started coming apart around the 2 1/4 or so. But dead stick, Ron ended up with the record. When we left, we had the fuel record at 178 miles an hour, and we had the gas record at 192. So that was our first year at Bonneville.
That's kind of a pretty good start there right away. Boom.
And then there were a couple other cars there in 2016 also running flatheads. Supercharged flatheads, rear engine modified class. There were 2 other cars there. And I recall there was one other guy, I think he was from Idaho. He might have been the guy who actually had the record. He was a few cars behind us in line when I was going to make my first run on the short course. And he came up and was looking at the car. And at the time, we went out with an open trailer. And we had to cover it in Easy Up that we kept covering the car on the trailer as we moved up in line to keep the sun off the aluminum, to keep the heat out of the water tanks, because I don't know what's going to happen for 3 miles wide open. Is the engine going to get too hot? Because it's a total loss system. The amount of water we have in the car, that's the only cooling. We have no radiator. So in the end, we ended up driving the car. This guy mentioned that he was coming back next year with an Ardun in the car. And of course, I'm like, an Ardun in the car? I've been driving an Ardun for over a decade now.
Yeah.
So just nonchalantly, I said, yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. Well, in the end, shorten this story, 2017, Ron and I went to Bonneville with an Ardun that we spent probably 8 months to build. 5-main bearing Ardun, same thing, 292 cubic inches, incredible amount of power. Ron wanted a red hat. He took the car in the very first pass ever. The car was over 200 miles an hour.
Wow.
At the 3rd mile.
Killer.
And when we were all said and done, I ended up getting my red hat, and Ron got his red hat, and we left Bonneville with the record at 225. So between Ron and I, we were making like 6 runs ever at Bonneville. We left there with red hats in our 2nd year ever.
So you did pretty good. And you've been chasing it, trying to up your records over the years.
The Flathead was the challenge. Over the years, we kept going back. We never went back after 17 with an Ardun. We went back with the Flathead every year. Every year, we kept going back with the Flathead with the hopes of getting it to the 200s, and it was a struggle. There were years where the intake manifold wasn't working right. The course conditions were terrible. Eventually, I finally got the gas record to 196, and we got the fuel records up into the 180s. And then we come back home, and finally, talking with Ron, we made a decision. The transmission, we still have to work on the car. We were making power, but it's hard at 3 miles to get the Flathead to pull it. Once we got into high gear, the engine it's hitting the air and all that. It's really, really struggling. And we reconfigured the car, and we worked on the engine some more, still sticking with 292 cubic inches, and went back in 2021. Course conditions were really nice. We now have 5 speeds instead of 3. And right off the trailer, I qualified at 204 miles an hour at the 3rd mile, which we have been working on realistically from 2016. And after that, I backed it up on Sunday morning. And then I put our dear friend Jeff Arnett from San Diego in the car. He's from the Bean Bandits Car Club. Jeff and the Arnett family, they've been going to Bonneville for decades. He's an amazingly knowledgeable guy. The experience and the history is mind-boggling talking with him. But he never got the red hat. So I said, what you're going to do is we're putting you in the car and you're going to run on our fuel record. Still burning gasoline. And I told him the deal is you got to pay for the gas. So Jeff, Sunday afternoon, got in the car and qualified at 205.
Nice.
And then Monday morning, he backed it up at a 206, and he got the fuel record at 206, and he got his hat.
Wow.
And lots of tears. He's
Oh,
a crier.
God.
Oh yeah.
He's a crier.
You know, it was
It's a
neat.
big deal. I mean,
Here we are, a group from Connecticut. You know, we're Connecticut Street Rod Association. Guys from the car club come out there with us to support us. And here we are, Bonneville, in the Bean Bandits Car Club, and it's a young club. And it's all these young guys looking at Jeff Arnett because he's one of the elders now. And for us to give him the opportunity to get in the car and do this, they came the morning of the backup run, and they were just, you know, all in awe of what's about to happen. And it was a great time to see the respect from them, not only to what we were doing, but what the possibility was that one of the icons of the club is going to get this hat.
Cool.
And the rest was history because it happened.
And then Jeff
there.
said, if I get this red hat, what did he want?
Well, one of the things we were trying to find in 2021 at Bonneville was a freaking banana
Ice
split.
banana
fried
There's
cream.
no ice cream shops.
We can't find ice cream.
But I
As
found
time
one.
went on, 2021, so what happens now, it's Monday. We're at the hotel, Motel 6 in the Utah side of Wendover.
okay.
And the Bean Bandits put on an ice cream party, banana split. There was beer there
Nice.
as well,
Diana
too.
Branch
Yeah.
bought all the stuff.
And all the Bean Bandits are there, and we're just having a party in the hotel
And
parking
then
lot.
while they were partying, we decorated Jeff's room.
It was just, you know, it was just a cool time.
That's awesome.
And then a day or so later, we're going down one of the side streets, and we found the freaking ice cream place.
Of course.
They have banana splits of
And
all
they're
things.
good too.
So that it was
So
just
every year now we go
it
there.
was just
Go
a
there.
cool time to be able to do that, experience it, and here we are, Connecticut club, California club, just hanging out together, and you know, just having a great time. And then to continue on 21, Ron Jr. had the record in his name, the fuel record. What we never did was run the roadster, engine modified roadster with a flathead beyond mile 3 ever. And because the engine is only 292 cubic inches, I wanted to take the car and put it in the D-blown gas rear engine modified roadster class by cubic inches. And the reason we wanted to do that was because the blown small block Chevrolet rear engine modified roadster record was 170 miles an hour. We got the flathead records over 200. Unfortunately, the SCTA officials would not allow the vintage engine to run in the overhead class.
Oh,
That was plan. We had plan A was me to get to 200. I did it. Plan B, Jeff get the hat, 200. Did it. Plan C was, let's go get the D record over 200. They wouldn't allow it. So we still put Ron in the car. We changed the gear in the quick change, changed the jets in the carburetor, one single 4-barrel on the blower. Ron's on the long course. At mile 3, Ron went 210. Continued to mile 4, and he went 219.8 with the Ford Flathead in a roadster burning gasoline.
nuts.
And that is the fastest flathead record that we know of in a roadster burning gasoline at Bonneville.
Crazy.
And every year since, that's been our goal. Let's
Chasing
go
that.
back
Yep.
to get the flathead record in the 2 teens. And here I was with a flathead as a Lakester watching Eric Hansen with the Lakester record in the 2 teens. We have the potential with a roadster to put the record in the 2 teens, and that's our goal for hopefully this year.
Wow. So, with you got to meet Zora.
Oh gosh, yes.
So, what was the? I mean, you got to spend time with him, which is incredible. Was there anything that you both took from that that was most interesting, or anything that when
Yeah, the questions that he asked him.
The questions, if you had that opportunity and Zora Arkus-Duntov's in front of you, and you know the stories about the Ardun, and the stories about the Chrysler Hemis coming out, and the numbers that may or may not have been produced.
Yep.
I sit down. I don't know Zora Arkus-Duntov. This is in 1991.
We're on a
Okay.
picnic table.
Yeah, we're at a picnic table. Laura and I with
Got
Ron.
a hamburger.
Yeah, we went to get at the concession stand a hamburger, and the individual who was putting the event together with Ardun's at Watkins Glen had owned at the time the Zora Arkus-Duntov Allard with an Ardun in it. So he brought Zora personally to the Glen in '91 because it was 1951 when that Allard ran with an Ardun in it, with Duntov actually driving there. So because we had an Ardun in our Deuce Roadster, he reached out to us, would you come with your hot rod? We did this. And with Ron, Laura, and I, we're there to get some lunch. The fellow's wife brings us to where the lunch was because we're at Watkins Glen. I've never been there in my life.
Yep.
So she was a bit of the tour guide, and I sit down, and his the guy's name was Tom Turner, who put this gathering together. His wife asked, Ron, did you ever meet Zora? I said, no. She says, you're sitting next to him.
What? What?
So I introduced myself, and I said, I have that Roadster with the Ardun in it. We chatted a bit, and I said,
He signed our license plate.
yeah, he came by, and because the license plate on the Roadster says Ardun, and
Yeah.
he signed it. And I said, can I ask you a couple questions? And he asked broken English. After being in the United States for decades, he still has broken English.
Oh, okay.
And I asked him, I said, did the Ardun heads get copied? And he relayed a story to me. He's in the United States, 1951, driving in his car someplace in the United States. His wife Effie is next to him in the car, and he sees a billboard, and there was on the billboard the 1951 production Hemi, and he said, Effie, look, there's my motor. That's what he said to me. Now, there's Mopar guys that'll go, no, that's not true. We know, obviously, that the Hemi combustion chamber pre-exists the production of the Ardun. In the 30s, there was a Hemi combustion chamber. But was the production of a V8 Hemi in a production car, was it based off of something? And if you do dimensions, 3/4 of with the way you could take an early Hemi intake and put it on an Ardun head. The angles are different, but the bolt pattern would work if you take some time.
Wow.
And there's also a photograph of a Hemi-headed 6-cylinder in a book about Hemi engines, which shows there's a 6-cylinder Hemi head that Mopar did use for development. And when you look at that valve cover, there's 2 plugs together, 2 plugs together, 2 plugs together. Now where's that engine? It's never been found. But that's in this book as well, because I love Hemis. I have books. I've always studied them. I've always admired them. So now that's the first question. Then the next question I asked was, how many sets actually exist? And he said it was between 225 and 250 sets. So from the man's mouth himself, those 2 questions were answered that I had asked him. Wow. And of all the other things, we chatted about different things. He asked about what I did with oiling and things of that nature. And we stood over looking at the engine, and I talked to him about it.
Very cool.
Being at Watkins Glen, there were Corvette guys there too, and they wanted to abscond with this guy and take him away. So it was a cool time to be able to actually be there to talk with him and to meet the fella.
One again, in a once in a lifetime type
Truly,
thing to get that information. Is there a piece of Ardun history, or obviously you collect things? What do you have? Any 1 or 2 pieces that are the coolest or most important, or something in all the years of collecting Ardun items? And
so we go back to Zora Arkus-Duntov and the Allard.
yes,
We go to the production of Hemi. That Allard was found by this guy, Tom Turner. It was found in Texas. Tom Turner lived in Texas. He's an Allard collector, restorer.
okay,
He finds this Allard with a tree growing through it in Texas. Documentation by Allard is very, very good. The
Okay.
identification number, when he investigates it, discovers that it was a pre-production J2 1949 Allard that was sent to the docks in New York City to a guy by the name of Zora Arkus-Duntov.
Holy crap.
That Allard, found in Texas, when Duntov ran it at Watkins Glen in 1951, eventually was sold, and it was driven by a fella here in Connecticut, I'm not sure his name. For a few years in the 50s, the existence of the Allard was documented at various road races that this particular owner had run the car at. And then there's a period in the 50s where the cars disappeared, unknown. Now, here it is in 1991. It's at Watkins Glen, all restored. The guy, Tom Turner, knew where the engine was located. The engine that was in that Allard is believed to have been the first Ardun, and Tom Turner had discovered where that engine ended up. That comes now back to a story about the Bean Bandits Car Club. Bean Bandits are out of San Diego, California. The Arnett family has run a fuel-injected Ardun in their Streamliner at Bonneville and El Mirage for a very long time.
Oh, okay.
There was a member of the Bean Bandits who had moved from San Diego, moved to Texas. When he was in Texas, Joaquin Arnett, the patriarch of the Arnett family and the Bean Bandits, as far as we know, received a call from this former Bean Bandits member that there was an Ardun engine available in Texas. Jeff Arnett explained to me, as a family, they loaded up in the family van or whatever it was and drove to Texas to pick up the Ardun. And it went back to San Diego. They've raced it for a long time, burning nitromethane at El Mirage. It's going over 200 miles an hour, the Ardun heads that were on the Duntov Allard. Those Ardun heads are now located in the San Giovanni collection.
But they're the ones out of
that Duntov Allard. Now, Jeff Arnett
wow.
understood the importance of them and understood that to continue to run them on nitromethane, to use them to teach the rest of the younger fellows in the Bean Bandits how to do the nitro, how to do the injection, how to not gamble and ruin them. He had an idea on what he would like to have done with those heads, the original heads. And he and I talked, and I said, Jeff, if you're okay with that and you understand that any of the Arnetts are okay with this, Jeff is the last really, then I would be very, very interested in having them and put those in the collection. So at this point, in my opinion, we know those are the Duntov Allard Ardun heads.
Wow.
Tom Turner actually went to San Diego to try to get those heads. And Jeff's dad, the arrangements didn't go well. Apparently, Tom Turner's mechanic, who built the Ardun engine that was in the Allard at the time, at the Glen in 91, the guy was kind of like, he was from the Deep South, and the Arnetts are Mexican, and it just didn't work well.
Yeah, it just didn't go well.
Didn't go well.
Got
Is
it.
all that I'll say. But in the end, it didn't end up with the heads to put with the Allard, and those heads now will never be with that engine with the Allard. The Allard is actually here in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
Duntov's Allard. It's in Rocky Hill, and that Ardun engine that mechanic from the Deep South built, that was in Tom Turner's. That he ran in 91, which, by the way, ran deplorably. And that same mechanic didn't want to listen to me because I just so happened to have one running really well in the parking lot and didn't want to even listen to me. So I just backed off. But
Understood. Yeah.
the fellow who owns the Duntov Allard today, his name's Jerry Lettieri, and runs really, really bad. So I ended up rebuilding the engine for him, and learned a lot about this great mechanic from the deep south, and freshened up the engine, fixed all the things that were wrong, and the engine runs fantastic now. But it's amazing that the whole history of the Ardun and all of this comes full circle to the point where the car's in Connecticut,
Wow.
the heads are in Connecticut, and as we've looked at yours, in my opinion, the second most iconic set is here right now too.
Crazy. Going back to damn Pennsylvania.
Yes, it came all the way east. It's
Yeah.
amazing,
Oh,
absolutely
man.
amazing.
So what? Now you have blueprints as well.
Yes, we have blueprints.
Like that's
The blueprints are here,
nuts. Nuts.
and you were going to own them. You're
That's
going to have them.
That's wild. Incredible.
And the blueprints are actually signed by George Kudish. George Kudish's initials are on those prints,
Wow.
and they're dated September 1947.
For the IronTrap Museum of Hot Rodding.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
We're putting that in the world. It's not a thing yet, but yeah. So, kind of to wrap things up, the question, and we talk about a lot on our channel, and it's in the hobby a lot. What was both of your take on young people in hot rodding and continuing on with this world? Do you think that you guys get out and around a lot, and I, for one, can speak on that. You're very helpful for younger people. Most of the young guys I know that have talked to you have spoken about how helpful you are, and are very surprised that someone as accomplished as yourself is willing to help. Do you guys think there's a lot of interest from younger people, or what's your take on the future of hot rodding and racing?
The doom and gloom that we will hear, and you have heard as well, like we'll go to Hershey and, oh my God, where's the young people?
Yep.
Obviously, they can't step into things like what you or I have.
Yes.
It's taken us a lifetime to do this. But there are the guys building the AV8s, a lot of guys. They love the hot rodding. Is there thousands? Maybe not. But there certainly is hundreds, just in our general area, the eastern part of the United States.
Yep.
And look, this past weekend, we went to Oxford Plains. Look at how many Flatheads were running, how many young people are playing with these. There's plenty of people that look like Laura and I, or look like me with gray hair, obviously. But there's just as many young people doing it, and they're just beginning to learn. And like you say, there's the one fellow who was at Oxford with his supercharged Flathead. I gave him a lot of information, and I've talked to him in the past. I know he's losing a lot of sleep, as I would too, because there's so many ways to do things, and there's ways to do it and not waste. And that's what I'm guiding him. I can't keep the secrets. Can we keep a secret about what we do inside our stock block Ford Flatheads that go over 200 miles an hour? Yes.
Yeah,
We'll not talk about that.
Right.
But when it comes to reliability, longevity, economic ways to do it, not that the word flathead and economic you could put together, but there's ways to do it and not waste money numerous times. So guiding people like that, I enjoy doing it. I love doing it at Hershey. By me going to Hershey and trying to liquidate my collectibles, it's my flathead parts. I love it when an AV8 guy is going to put it on his car. I am a keeper of it for a while, and the next young guy who's going to use it, that's cool. I love that idea. And we'll talk up hot rodding as much as we can. So I don't. To me, there's no doom and gloom.
Right.
The doom and gloom is the guys who are speaking it, in my opinion. That's all.
We always let little kids sit in the car, get the feel of it.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
a lot of people, they don't do this. But
Yeah.
I open the door, I'm like, Coop, get in.
Because all it takes is we call it the switch in a lot of stuff we talk about. There's a switch when almost all of us can remember a moment. So you guys doing that, that could be that switch for that little boy or girl, whatever. And then next thing you know, they're going to Bonneville or going to, doing whatever.
It's pretty much what I say is I'm planting the seed.
Perfect.
That's what it is. Can we plant the seed? What you and Mike are doing, Steve are doing, by doing that on YouTube, this is stuff we couldn't do. Hey, we had to wait to see a magazine. Here it is. We could look at what you're up to. Even I'll look and I'm going, damn, what a hell of an idea.
They're going, man, I'm getting a phone call. You shouldn't have done that. That's not going to work.
And I would do that too. I have your phone, and I will do that.
And I love that because it's like, You know, that's the part I like about with social media and different things nowadays. We're able to share and communicate instead of building a car for a whole year and you bring it to an event and then everybody goes, "You did that thing wrong." You can just call them quick and say, "Hey," or send a text, "Hey, I saw you did that. That might not work out the best." So I think that, and I think events, it's all what events you go to. So the event we were at last weekend, I would say it was probably 50-50 with older people in your age group.
Yes.
And then the younger people.
Absolutely.
And then there was like, I saw, there was like a young girl.
Yeah.
She was maybe teen.
Yeah.
That was racing. So it's like.
Her mother was a flag person.
Amazing. And
Yeah.
you're seeing.
I just found that out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think you're also seeing more females getting into hot rodding. I guess it's just, with it being more available and social media, more people are getting touched by this stuff and are getting into it. So seeing a teenage girl drag racing at an event with a Flathead, that's like,
Yep.
you couldn't imagine it. So
Yep.
I'm glad you guys are sharing the same.
That's the neat thing about it. I call it influencers. Obviously, we're involved with Carly Moody in our race car, and we're helping her on her Deuce Roadster project the best we could. Carly is an example of a female who is out there. We ran into guys in February at the Grand National when we were out in California, and a fellow comes up and says, "Oh, Carly Moody, she's involved with your race car." Yeah, she goes, and the guy goes, "Oh, my young daughter, it just loves her." Here's
so cool.
a grown man whose young daughter is being honestly influenced by the females who are getting into our hobby, which is outstanding. It's great, without a doubt. That is nothing like we ever had. I never saw that.
They see it and they say, "Oh, she's doing it. Maybe I can do this." So it's good. So I think that's the upsides of the social media stuff. There's definitely downsides, but I think that's good. So, well, thank you guys for letting me ask you a bunch of questions. It was really cool. It's always a pleasure. So, can't wait to see what records you guys are hitting and what's going on. It's really fun to watch.
And we can't wait to see that in your car.
I know. Oh, believe me, I'm very excited. Yeah, maybe. Not even go to sleep tonight.
I'm going to wait for that call. Ron, guess what I broke?
Yeah.
In the drivetrain.
Well, that's a good thing, right? We're using
Using the option.
using the options.
Using the option.